right, moving right along, we are in Proverbs 23. We're going to look at a few chunks of Proverbs 23. Just a kind of a side note for you, as you read Proverbs 23, we see less of the one-liners, and we see actually chunks. So we see verses kind of that go together to form the thought. And so I'm first going to read verses 1 to 3. It says, "When you sit down to eat with a ruler, observe carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. Do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food." Now, we have to talk about this because what in the world does this mean? So the idea here is, so put yourself back in this kind of time period where you have a king, and the king would sit down and just have this lavish feast. And who eats with the king? Well, not just anybody eats with the king. There would be councilmen, there would be advisors, people that the king is going to sit down with and talk through different matters and try to make decisions. And so the idea here is that if you're one of these people, if you're one of these advisors, and you're sitting there and you see all of this delicious food, and you're like, I just can't control myself, and I've got to have this, and you just gobble it up, and you eat yourself just sick, you get like a stomach ache because you ate too much. The king's gonna look at you and come to the conclusion of, how in the world can I trust this person as an advisor when they can't even control themselves when it comes to their appetite? There's no way I'm going to be able to trust this person when it comes to matters of war or of policy, because this person's made a fool of themselves. So that's kind of the idea here, and it's kind of verse 2 is kind of strong because it's talking about putting a knife to your throat, but it's the idea is that you'd be better off dead instead of making a fool of yourself, because essentially you'll be dead, to the king, because the king's not going to, look to you for advice anymore. You've pretty much blown your shot at that point. So that's what Proverbs 1 to 3 is talking about. Let's look at another set of verses. How about 10 and 11? Because we've seen this come up a few times already. And so in 10 and 11 it says, "Do not move an ancient landmark or enter the fields of the fatherless. For their Redeemer is strong, he will plead for their cause against you." Now, when it's talking about moving these ancient landmarks, it's talking about ancient, like, boundary stones. Like, okay, so this is my property marked out by stones, and then your property's over there, and your property's over there. And it's really, when it talks about this, it's often going to talk about the widow or the orphan. So obviously the widow is generally speaking, it's the woman who's lost her husband, or of course the orphan is a child or children that has lost their parents. In both of those cases, losing your husband or losing your parents, you lose all representation within the community. And so the Bible is very pro widow, orphan, and an alien. So, person that comes in, from another country, not necessarily a creature that comes from another planet. But the Bible is very, very particular and says, these people must be protected. We must care for these people. We must meet these people's needs. We can't just let these people, lose their representation and completely lose their voice and just get walked on by society. No, the Bible says, no. Take care of these people. Do not take advantage of these people. And that's what it's talking about here in 10 and 11. It talks about, don't move the ancient landmark. Again, don't move those boundary marks, or into the fields of the fatherless. So don't be going into, the fields of the orphan and, taking their crop. Don't be doing that. For their Redeemer is strong, and he will plead their cause against you. So Redeemer, Hebrew word goel. Typically, if you think about the book of Ruth, you think about Boaz being the Redeemer to Ruth and Naomi. It's kind of the same idea, except for here, the implication is that the Redeemer is most likely God. So pretty powerful Redeemer. So if you're trying to take advantage of the widow or the orphan, the Redeemer is going to have a say in that. Let's look at one more. Let's look at 29 to 35, and this is kind of, I'm not going to read all of this. This is kind of like this extended dialogue about alcoholism, or someone that gets drunk all the time. And it starts out by saying, who has woe, who has sorrow, who has strife, who has complaining, Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? So it opens up with this series of questions, and when it comes to like woe or sorrow or strife or complaining, oftentimes people that alcoholics, they go to alcohol to numb these kind of things, to numb their woes, to numb their sorrows, to numb their strifes, to get relief from these pains that they feel. And so Proverbs goes on to talk about alcoholism, and it really paints it out in this horrendous picture. Being drunk, and it talks about how don't look at wine when it's red and when it sparkles in the cup and it goes down smoothly. It looks so nice then, but it follows up in verse 32. It says, "In the end, it bites like a serpent and it stings like an adder. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart other perverse things." So you're going to see strange things. You're going to have double vision. You're going to see things that aren't there. You're going to see things later than you should. Your heart's going to utter perverse things. So you're going to be saying perverse things, things that you typically wouldn't say. And so again, it really just paints out this horrific picture of being drunk. And then really the tragedy is at the very, very end here, because all of this being said, in verse 35 it says, "They struck me, you will say, but I was not hurt. They beat me, but I did not feel it. When shall I wake? I must have another drink." So again, Proverbs paints out this picture, this kind of a rather graphic picture of the horrific nature of being drunk and all that it entails. And then again, kind of the great tragedy here is even after that nightmare scenario, whenever this alcoholic wakes up, they're stumbling around looking for their next drink because they want to put themselves back in that position. Not that they want to be in the nightmare, but they want to be in that state of numbness. This is where they can again kind of numb out their woes, sorrows, and strifes. It's a sad picture. I know a lot of people struggle with that today. So that's what Proverbs has to say about that. So Proverbs 23. We'll see you in the next video.